J.C. Aspley, the author of this presentation, is eminently qualified to discuss both psychological and practical salesmanship. He has been actively engaged in selling for more than 30 years. Highly successful in a brilliant career that has included founding the Dartnell Corporation and the publication of Sales Management magazine, Mr. Aspley's continuing quest for improved sales methods through research and application is known and respected throughout the business world. The principles he presents and explores in this recording are neither revolutionary nor startling. They're practiced every day by the nation's top-flight salesmen. However, the application of these same principles is enhanced by Mr. Aspley's clear and lucid understanding of them. This is an age of intense competition, and it takes a good man to sell successfully against price resistance. Yet, experienced salesmen, no matter what product or service they offer, are producing consistently high sales records day in and day out because they know how to sell quality. The meaning of quality to salesmen.
A number of years ago, H.J. Heinz, the food packer who made 57 varieties famous, was implored by his salesman to put out a 10-cent can of tomatoes. At that time, the Heinz product was a 12-cent seller, and his salesman thought that if they had a cheaper brand, it would be a simple matter for them to meet the lower-priced competition. But Mr. Heinz would have none of it. "Don't you know," he said, "that the reason this business has been successful is because we don't have a 10-cent can to sell? We don't want to put ourselves in the 10-cent class. Sell quality, and the price won't matter." There are salesmen today who have the same notion about the price question as the Heinz salesman had back in those days. They're convinced that the reason they can't get more business is because their price is too high. They say that if their company would only cut the prices a little, they know they'd get a lot more business. But could they? The Steinway piano sells for nearly 3 times the price of a piano made by a competitor who claims that his instrument is just as good as a Steinway. Yet Steinway salesmen consistently outsell the price competitor salesmen. Let's consider the product or service you sell. How many concerns undersell you in price? These competitors say their product or their service is just as good as yours. They advance all kinds of imaginary reasons why they can undersell you. They say they share the advertising saving, operate a profit-sharing plant, control their own source of raw material, or offer some equally plausible excuse for the lower price. Naturally, they make an occasional sale. You can sell some people anything once. But the fact remains that the combined sales of these price pirates are but a fraction of the business done by quality houses. Moreover, the quality house will be in business and prospering when the man who stakes his future on price alone will have long since been forgotten. The quality companies are able to pile up these sales records not because of their price, but in spite of it. The price of a Steinway piano is its badge of quality. Even though there may be other pianos just as good, the man who buys a Steinway gets its extra cost back every time he looks at it in his living room. Cheap things are made for people who cannot pay more, for people who must get along the best they can with something almost as good. Such products are built down to a price, rather than up to a standard. Lacking quality, sooner or later they will cause dissatisfaction. The buyer forgets that when he made his purchase, he compromised with something cheap. He expects the same results from his cheap piano as he would from a Steinway. And when those results are not forthcoming, he is aggravated and put out. Forever after, he is down on the man who sold him. Conversely, the man who buys a quality product soon forgets that he paid more for it. He remembers only the satisfaction it gives him. Quality is the strongest talking point a salesman can have. Once a company has won a reputation for quality, each pleased customer attracts others. That is why a salesman representing a quality house is better able to build up a territory than a salesman who has to start out every morning and find new customers to replace those who have left in search of something cheaper. Actually, the secret of selling quality is simply a matter of arithmetic, or rather, a matter of remembering the symbols of arithmetic: plus, minus, divide, multiply. You apply those symbols in selling quality this way. The plus sign, you add up the benefits. The minus sign, you subtract the disappointments. The division sign, you divide the slightly higher cost by the longer and more effective service. The multiplication sign. You multiply the satisfactions. Add, subtract, divide, and multiply. These are the 4 important steps to selling quality. And quality means repeat orders, because satisfied customers tell their friends, and their friends tell their friends. It means a long-lasting business relationship. It means a successful career in selling without the headaches and the anguish that go with a product or service that has to be sold as something almost as good as the best. Never lose sight of the often forgotten truth that a salesman's success is 6/10 himself and 4/10 his product. If you sell a thing that is better than your competitor is selling, you may be sure that the world will find it out and want it. And when people start wanting the thing you're selling, the measure of your success depends only on what you do about it.
The basis of all quality sales.
2 farm wagons stood in a public market. Both were loaded with potatoes in bags. A woman stopped before the first wagon. "How much are potatoes today?" she asked the farmer. "$3.50 a bag," the farmer replied. "Oh my," exclaimed the woman. "That's pretty high, isn't it? Last week I paid only $3 for them." "Potatoes have gone up," said the farmer with a shrug of his shoulders. The woman went on to the second wagon and asked the same question. But the second farmer's manner was in marked contrast to the first. Instead of replying indifferently to her question, he said, "These are the best potatoes in the market, madam. In the first place, I raised the kind with small eyes, so there'll be no waste in peeling. Potatoes are too high now to peel away. Then I sort them by sizes. In each bag, you'll find a large size for boiling and a medium size for baking. The baking size cooks quickly, saves money on your fuel bill. Another thing, we wash all our potatoes before we sack them. You're not paying for a lot of dirt that you can't eat. The price? I'm getting $4 a bag for them, and they're worth every cent." The second farmer sold his customer 2 bags of potatoes at $4 a bag, despite the fact that she could have bought potatoes at the next wagon for 50 cents a bag less. He knew the principle of selling quality. His competitor did not. For as every man who has ever sold a product knows, there are 2 avenues of appeal in making a sale. One of these appeals to a customer's feelings, the other appeals to his reason. Here's another case in point. A man goes into a clothing store with a firm determination not to pay more than $75 for a suit of clothes. The salesman suggests that he try on a $100 suit and tells him that it makes him look like a prosperous banker or a successful member of one of the professions. The man pays the extra $25 without hesitation because the salesman appealed to his pride. The customer's reasoning mind told him he could get just as much wear out of a $75 suit as he could from the more expensive model, but the human desire to look well overrode his reasoning. The emotions which govern the feeling mind are love of self, love of family, love of friends, desire for power, pride, comfort, and convenience. There are others, but these are the principal ones, and no quality sale was ever consummated without appealing to one or more of these emotions. Price, the only objection a man has to quality merchandise, exists only in his sense of reasoning. You cannot sense or feel price, but you can sense and feel some of the other emotions I've mentioned. And since this is a proved fact, you can use it as a safe rule to follow in selling a quality product. Remember, the desire for quality can best be created in the mind of a buyer by appealing to the emotions which he senses or feels. We can conclude, then, that as a general rule, emotions dominate reason. Consequently, if we appeal first to these emotions in selling a high-priced product, it's possible to create such a strong desire for quality that we can impel investigation and desire without raising the question of price.
Laying a sound foundation.
Many of the alleged quality sales talks used by salesmen sound impressive, but they don't mean very much. A sales manager for one of the big musical instrument houses decided that orders were falling off because his salesmen had forgotten how to put punch into their sales talks. So he called his men in off the road and set up a sales convention. One of the features of the meeting was a sales down, wherein each man in turn was required to sell his proposition to many different dealers who attended the convention by special arrangement. The sales manager was to pass upon each sale and award honors to the most convincing salesman. The demonstrations were held in the company's home office conference room, at one end of which a tape recorder was concealed. This machine recorded every word of what was said without the salesman knowing they were being clocked. Afterward, the sales argument of each man was transcribed on paper, and the papers were judged on the basis of the number of statements made by the salesman, which could not just as well be made by a competitor. Results showed that more than half of the arguments used by the salesman would sell a competing product just as well as their own. The sales manager was also amazed to discover that in practically every case, his salesmen were hammering the word quality at the buyer. Apparently, they were ignoring the fact that the average buyer hears so much about quality, too often from salesmen who are selling anything but quality, that the word alone has long since lost its impact. Specifically, the word quality has become as hackneyed and trite as expressions like, "it's the best made," "has no equal," "wonderful buy," and "definitely superior." There may have been a time when those phrases sold merchandise, but that time has gone forever. I'll tell you exactly what the sales manager told his men at the close of that convention. It's an excellent rule to remember. Never use the word quality in an argument. Make the quality apparent by inference. Instead, emphasize one quality point and drive that point home. In this particular case, the manager suggested that his men use the reputation of the firm as their quality emphasis. That was certainly one point of quality that no competitor could use. Let the company's success be your success. A smart salesman never sells his employer short. You can't sell quality unless you know quality. And when you've acquired this information, thorough and extensive knowledge of your product, use it to prove the merit in what you're selling, rather than to prove that your competitor's product is without merit. Let's use milk for an example. To most homemakers, milk is milk. She knows that the law requires all milk and milk products to meet certain health and purity standards. Suppose you're the salesman, and the milk you're selling is priced 2 cents a quart more than your competitor's product. There's a real selling job to be done in a situation like this. If you try to dismiss the issue by pointing out that your milk is better and well worth 2 cents a quart more, you'll only invite an argument. Consequently, as a skillful salesman, you make what the customer might consider a big price seem small by adding up the plus values as they relate to the family's well-being. You remind her that regardless of what she may think, she is not buying milk, but rather the health-giving qualities of milk. You admit that 2 cents a quart may appear to be a good deal more to pay, and it would be if you were selling ordinary milk, but you're offering superior quality. You explain that a single quart of your milk has as much calcium as 20 helpings of beans, plus as much phosphorus as 2 pounds of fish, plus as much energy as 3/4 of a cup of sugar. When you add up the plus benefits, the 2 cents, which originally seemed important, becomes incidental. The well-informed salesman not only understands these little points of superiority, which put his merchandise into the quality class, he uses them consistently to sell quality.
Making the buyer want quality.
Before you can make a quality sale, you have to make the buyer want the benefits of quality more than he wants the money these combined benefits cost. A great mistake, one which has caused the undoing of many salesmen, is to assume that just because the product you're selling is superior to others, that buyers will want it. This isn't necessarily true. In nearly every case, the want has to be created. And it's at this point that a salesman needs imagination as well as enthusiasm. Remember, until you have brought your prospect to the point of wanting something better than he's now buying, he'll remain indifferent to quality arguments. This is especially true in selling a product for use by institutions. Generally, a committee or a board must approve the purchase, and the order frequently goes to the low bidder simply because the price seems lower, when actually, over a period of time, it would cost more. A salesman friend of mine found himself in that situation a few years ago when he was trying to sell a chipping machine to a municipality. At the town council meeting, where the decision was to be made, my friend realized that the order was probably going to one of 2 competitors who had quoted lower prices. He asked for a hearing, and it was granted. The salesman addressed the council this way. "Gentlemen," he said, "you asked my firm to bid on a wood chipping machine, which will enable you to save hauling away brush and tree trimmings from the streets in your town." The council members agreed. "Then," my friend continued, "I would like to ask if the cutting qualities of our machine met your specifications." The chairman of the group said the machine's performance was satisfactory. "Then the price must be too high. Is that correct?" The chairman replied, "It certainly is." The salesman smiled and said, "I agree with you. The price is high. Not too high, but high. In fact, under the circumstances outlined in your request for a bid, I would advise you to turn it down. That is, if you're considering the cost of the equipment only and disregarding your overall budget. At this time, that includes rental and towing of your present wood chipper, rental of power saw, and rental of snow plow for emergencies. Our price may seem high for a mechanical device that can only chip wood, but our machine is so built that with 2 attachments you can convert it to a heavy-duty saw or a snowplow. Think of the number of jobs it'll do, the length of service it will give you. Look at the number of times this equipment will be used every year, all year long, summer and winter, as compared to a less versatile machine. Only when you consider the whole problem, gentlemen, can you arrive at total value. The multiple uses of our product bring you multiple value and multiple savings. When you consider it from the full point of view, I think you'll agree that of the 3 bids submitted, ours is the lowest." When my salesman friend completed this convincing line of argument, the town council agreed with him and he made the sale. But until he had pointed out the added benefits and created in the minds of the councilmen a desire for quality, the principal consideration was price. When the benefits of the multiple-use wood chipper were stressed and the added savings explained, they changed their minds and decided to buy it. My friend simply made use of the arithmetic symbols to sell quality. He used the plus sign to add up the benefits, the plus values the buyer gets by making a slightly larger investment. He used the minus sign to subtract the disappointments that might result from not buying quality. They can easily amount to many times the few dollars more the buyer pays for quality. He used the division sign to divide the slightly higher first cost by the extra years of satisfaction and service the prospect gets when he buys quality. He used the multiplication sign to multiply the satisfaction that goes with quality, satisfactions that multiply customers and keep them coming back.
Getting your price.
Any product or service judged by itself alone is neither good nor bad, long nor short, hot nor cold, hard nor soft. Quality can be demonstrated only when you compare your product or service with a standard, an average, or something analogous. This is a fundamental principle of salesmanship. In the science of physics, it's called relativity. 50 degrees Fahrenheit is cold in the fall, warm in the spring. One traveler coming down a mountain strips off his coat in a lather of perspiration and meets another coming up shivering from the cold. Preserves are sweet if you've just eaten a pickle, sour if you've just had some ice cream. Place one hand in hot water and the other in cold water, then place both in water of the same temperature. The water will feel cold to one hand, warm to the other. Which is it, hot or cold? The answer depends on relativity. The same line of reasoning applies to selling. The quality assigned by a buyer to any product, service, or condition will be determined by what has gone before, and especially what has gone just before. The identical quality of what you sell may be poor in the eyes of a man accustomed to buying better quality. It may be better in the eyes of a man who's been buying an inferior grade. Therefore, it's necessary for you to take quality away from its isolation and surround it with other facts, which will serve as a basis for measurement. When you do this, a price which otherwise might seem prohibitive immediately dwindles until it seems of little consequence compared to the value you offer. The big trouble with inexperienced salesmen is that they get an idea into their heads that customers won't pay the price. And naturally, because they feel that way, it isn't surprising that the customers hold out. Here's a proved fact. Memorize it. There is no such thing as a customer who won't pay the price if the salesman knows how to sell quality. When the buyer raises price objections, it is poor salesmanship to take the objection too seriously. Above all, avoid becoming involved in an argument. Don't ever challenge the buyer by directly disagreeing with him. Remember, when you win an argument, you will more than likely lose the sale. In many cases, depending of course on the type of customer you're dealing with, an indirect story told in a good-natured way will oftentimes knock the props from under a price objection better than a half-hour's labored conversation. However, a sales talk that simply uses trickery to keep the buyer off the price question is not properly planned. The average buyer's first thought is, how much does it cost? When you avoid this question, it may convey the impression that even you believe the price is too high. More often than not, there's altogether too much conversation in the average sales solicitation. Get rid of the idea that you must necessarily talk your prospect into buying. This can be done, of course, but such sales are generally not satisfactory. They breed cancellations and returned goods. The order that stays sold is the order that the buyer has sold himself. And the secret of getting buyers to sell themselves is to ask questions. A well-known story in a book of Hindu philosophy is about an old teacher who had a pupil who was one of the show-me kind. He was filled with doubt and raised many questions. The wise and venerable teacher didn't answer any of his pupil's questions. He just sat there in silence. Faced with such a positive attitude, the younger man's doubts faded and vanished. Thus, the wise old teacher accomplished in a very few minutes what hours of oratory and a sledgehammer proof would never have done.
Making a big price seem small.
In easing a high price to a close-fisted buyer, it is often well to use percentages rather than price without qualification. A true story that occurred in St. Louis, Missouri, illustrates the point. A man who lived in that city had suddenly acquired a fortune and decided to build a fine house. Although he was a successful businessman, his appreciation for art and culture was somewhat limited. His wife, however, was aware of some of the finer things in life, and she was determined to have them. When they decided to build a house, she read every book she could find on architecture. She also familiarized herself with furniture and interior decoration. Even so, she was totally unprepared for the statement her husband made when they visited a hardware store. He said, "We came here to buy some locks and hinges for our new house, and some window latches, too. My contractor says he's given you the specifications. What'll the whole outfit cost?" The hardware salesman to whom he was speaking understood the business thoroughly. He also sized up the situation at a glance, asked the husband and wife to be seated for a few moments while they discussed builder's hardware from the dual standpoint of exterior construction and interior decoration. He illustrated his discussion by showing them various custom designs in hardware, comparing these with ordinary locks and hinges. He called their attention to the total value of their new home, to the large amounts they were spending for interior decoration, with special emphasis on the fact that the bill for hardware would certainly be a very small percentage of the total cost. The wife, of course, was very much interested because she knew something about the subject. Her husband was also impressed by the obvious difference between simple locks and hinges and metalwork that combined beauty with utility. However, after listening for a few minutes, he became impatient and said, "Young man, you're selling hardware and I like to hear you talk, but what I want to know is how much will it cost?" The salesman didn't hesitate a second. He looked directly at his customer and replied quietly, "You're mistaken, sir. I'm not selling hardware. I'm selling you art." The husband smiled grimly, but he appreciated the point. The salesman followed through immediately. He said, "Artistic hardware to match the theme and design of your interior decoration will cost approximately $3,000. You've stated that the total construction cost is $100,000. The hardware amounts to only 3% of that." The husband was convinced, and the sale was made a few moments later. Now, if the salesman in this case had said right at the beginning, "Hardware for your house will cost $3,000, he would probably have lost the sale. The wife was with him, but it was necessary to convert the husband. He accomplished it by the use of understanding, a little humor, extensive knowledge of his product, and especially by stressing the percentage of total cost rather than price alone. There is no hard or fast rule as to when price should be mentioned in the sale of quality merchandise. Many successful salesmen believe that it's poor salesmanship to give the impression that you're afraid of your price. They prefer to state the price at the very outset of the sales talk, as though it were their strongest point. In some cases, this is a good policy. In others, not so good. It's a moot question. Whether it's best to ease the price to a buyer or to set the price on a pedestal and point to it with pride is a matter only you can decide. You know your customers.
Price objections as sales points.
In disposing of price objections, it must be borne in mind that there are two kinds, the real objection and the excuse. The last mentioned variety is very likely to show itself at the beginning of the sale. It is the outward expression of the perversity in human nature which makes us instinctively oppose everything, no matter how helpful or valuable it may be. Businessmen are secretly afraid of being hoodwinked, and self-preservation has created this habit, just as nature makes us close our eyes unconsciously when danger threatens. The best way to proceed in such cases is to disregard the excuse and play on the prospective buyer's curiosity. It's the one faculty that's more powerful than an individual's natural perversity. It's a simple matter to classify a prospect's stock excuses and prepare replies for each of them. Thus, you will arouse his curiosity and his attention, the first step in making a sale. However, in planning replies to stock excuses, bear in mind that there are two kinds of attention, favorable and unfavorable. I know a salesman who thinks it's clever when the prospect brings up a stock excuse to come back with a smart answer. He believes in kidding the objector. If a dealer tells this particular salesman that his line is too high priced, he slaps the dealer on the back and says something like, "Sure it is. The law of compensation is still working, isn't it?" Now, such tactics may occasionally succeed, but in my opinion, that type of selling is a mistake. It doesn't pay. Instead, with the right kind of reply, you'll gain attention and, at the same time, push the prospect in the direction you wish him to go. Use objection to help the sale. They can easily be turned into reasons for buying, but it must be done without antagonizing or boring your prospect. When you reply to an objection, ask certain questions which the prospect can answer only in a specific way, thereby giving you complete control of the interview. By his answers, he will clear up his own problems and sell himself. Here's an example. A refrigerator salesman meets a bona fide price objection from a butcher by asking him if he's in business to stay or is he going to sell out within a few months. Naturally, the butcher answers one way or the other. If he's going to sell out, there's no need for the salesman to waste any further time. However, if he replies that he's in business to stay, the salesman says, "Mr. Jones, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it frankly. Across the street, there are two buildings. One is made of brick. The other is of frame construction. Suppose I owned both of these buildings, and I offer to sell either one of them to you. The initial cost of the brick building would be higher than the other, 4 or 5 times as high. But you could rent it for more and realize a higher profit every month. The frame building would cost a lot less, but it would also rent for less, plus the expense of upkeep because it's constructed of cheaper materials." The butcher agrees with this hypothetical comparison of buildings, so the salesman continues. "Mr. Jones, the refrigerator I'm selling is a good deal like those two buildings. We have deliberately set out to build a product that is as good as we can make it, and one that will pay you the highest returns over a period of time. Of course, I'm very much interested in what you say about our competitor's product and the price. The very fact that our refrigerator is being imitated is a high compliment to us. It proves that our product has merit. As a practical businessman, you know it's not possible for any manufacturer to build the best product he knows how to make, and then let his competitors dictate the price for which he must sell it. It simply can't be done. And inasmuch as you intend to stay in business, I don't think you want an imitation or a cheap refrigerator in your store. By using this procedure, the salesman has simply taken the buyer's objection to a high price and used it as proof of quality. The buyer's common sense tells him that what the salesman says is true.
Everybody hates a price cutter.
Nobody likes a price cutter. Even those who give him business do so reluctantly. There's always a question in the buyer's mind as to whether he could not have purchased for less if he'd held out longer. There's also the lingering suspicion that perhaps someone else is getting a better price. The owner of an appliance store in Chicago puts it this way. "If there's anything I detest," he says, "it's the salesman who always seems to find a loophole which enables him to quote a lower price. The salesman I like to do business with is the kind of fellow who quotes a fair price, but he'd rather leave without an order before he'd cut the price." Only yesterday, a salesman called on me and offered a new item for one of my small appliance lines. I felt it had merit and sales possibilities, but was afraid the price was too high. In other words, I objected. But the moment I voiced that objection, the salesman looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but that's the best price I have. I can't cut it for anyone." Just that simple statement and the tone of his voice made me believe him. I gave him an order. The Chicago store owner has a very logical and reasonable explanation for his attitude. He says, "Of course, on staple articles, we usually know whether or not the price is right. We soon learn which salesman can be talked into quoting a lower price. Those who establish themselves as one-price men are never questioned, either by me or any of my buyers. But once a man cuts a price, we feel that a battle over prices is necessary every time we give an order. Even after the order is placed, we still have the idea that we might even have been able to get a lower price if we'd insisted a little while longer. Then, too, there's always the feeling or suspicion that one of our competitors may be buying the same item at an even lower price." I agree 100% with that store owner in Chicago. Unfortunately, not all buyers are that straightforward and candid. Salesmen will do well to remember that some purchasing agents make their living out of the pennies they're able to squeeze out of sellers. They are practiced and adept in the fine art of preying on the fears of order-hungry salesmen. Resolve to keep fear out of your consciousness, and your success in selling is assured. Don't get discouraged or gloomy. That kind of attitude won't change the situation, and the moment you lose heart, you lose hold on yourself. Remember that every day other men are successfully surmounting the same obstacles that discourage you. School yourself to believe that what others can do, you can do. When a customer tells you that a competitor has offered him something just as good for 10% less, remember that thousands of salesmen are selling goods every day, even when the competition is 50% lower than the price they quote. The successful salesman approaches every prospect with a definite plan in mind. He knows the plan is one that the buyer can use profitably. Armed with this knowledge and confidence, he makes the buyer see the true value of the plan, and he gets the order. When you call upon a prospect, ask him for an order and are turned down, then go back and ask him for the same order a second time, you are weaker in the eyes of two men, the prospect and yourself.
Closing a quality sale.
Throughout this recording, you've heard salesmen in various lines of business successfully present quality as a method to break down the barriers of indifference and high price. But it must be kept in mind that quality talk by itself will not sell anything. It's one thing to convince a man that what you offer is better than what someone else offers. But it's quite another thing to make him want your product so badly that the reluctance to part with money is swallowed up by his desire to possess it. There's a constant temptation for the salesman representing an old and established firm to depend too much on the firm's prestige and not enough on his own effort. The same criticism is true of a salesman selling an article whose superior qualities are undisputed. He tends to lean on the quality factor too much. He expects it to do his selling for him, which of course it won't. It's not enough to convince your prospect of the high quality of the product you're offering. You must also make him want that quality more than he wants the money it will cost. In selling quality, there's one all-important point: the quality of your salesmanship. When you get a turn down here and a turn down there, until your pace begins to slow up, when you expect buyers to shoot objections, and you doubt your ability to answer those objections properly, what's wrong? Simply this: you're losing your quality. It needs warming up. In the printed booklet which accompanies this recording, you'll find a checklist for quality selling. Use it to check every sales possibility you encounter. Memorize the arithmetic of selling quality. The plus sign: add up the benefits, the plus values the buyer gets by making a slightly larger investment. The minus sign: subtract the disappointments that might result from not buying quality. The division sign: divide the slightly higher cost by the extra years of satisfaction when the prospect buys quality. Multiplication sign: multiply the satisfactions that go with quality, satisfactions that multiply customers and keep them coming back. Your success in selling quality depends on yourself. If you want to achieve big things, think big. Think big orders. Visualize them, then go out and get them. When the buyer brings up petty excuses and trivial objections, show him the bigger side of the problem. Dare to presume that the buyer thinks as you do, that he is a big-visioned businessman, even though he may not look the part. It's a curious fact that very frequently people who have the money to pay for quality do not look like quality themselves. Above all, hold fast to your faith in quality. It's the rock upon which enduring business is built. It is also the rock upon which the successful careers of thousands of top-flight salesmen have been founded. It has weathered depressions, booms, and busts. Twice blessed is the salesman who has a quality product to sell and knows how to sell it.